Hello, my name is Keona Stafford, and this is my IOP interactive oral presentation. This is my scene analysis of Psycho. This is proof that this is me. It's my hand, and this is my trusty snow leopard. So basically, the scene I chose is the moment that Marianne convinces the dealer to sell her car and trade it in for her old one. The reason I chose this is and I also included the part where she drives away from the dealership and arrives at the Bates Motel. So the reason I chose this is because I found it interesting how as she's driving away, she can hear the conversation of those looking for her, the officer and the dealer, her boss, the man who owned the money, and her sister. She can't herself hear the conversations, but we can. Everything seems to just sort of fit. And I find it very interesting that she is unaware of everyone's conversations, just like she's unaware of their fate, of her own fate. The relationship that this scene has with the rest of the film is that it shows how she's trapped in the car with nowhere to go besides away, or else she will be in trouble. Just as Norman is trapped in his own mind in the film and has nothing else to do besides obey what Mother requests. This shows this whole distrust of authority and unreliability. Marianne's actions are because she is scared and she does not trust the authorities, and they're very unreliable. They could have stopped all of this from happening, and Norman is afraid of his mother. The areas I will focus the most on are sound, mise-en-scène, lighting, and cinematography, while paying close attention to her expression as it changes as the night progresses. These place a role in establishing the mood and the director's intention. So the director intends for us to see how hard it was for Marianne to see the road ahead and to show us how everyone is looking for her and that she is running away from them. It also establishes her as the protagonist by showing us her struggle through point of view shots. The weather indicates how there is a change in her, or maybe even in her fate as she drives. The genre of this film is more of a horror psychological mystery thriller that is established also with this scene. It takes place in 1950s Phoenix, Arizona. This scene is strange because women often did not handle money, if not at all, and she gave the dealer $700 in cash, which is what he said was strange. Plus, she had in her possession $40,000 that she stole. The police force was growing rapidly during the 1950s, and there was an increase in negative attitudes towards the police, which is why there's this distrust of authority in this movie. So in the first shot, Marianne is speaking with the dealer and trying to convince him to allow her to buy a new car and trade in her old one. However, he's sort of hesitant because it's unusual for anyone, including a woman during this time, to rush a car sale. The cop that was following her in the scene before is across the street and is watching as she goes in to pay for a car. As she comes out, he's pulling up into the car lot. He gets out the car to stand next to the dealer as she drives away. And as she drives away, this man that I'm assuming works there shouts out to her because she left her bag behind, which shows how frantic and urgent of a state she was in, that she just was about to leave them. The visual style here is that the little dialogue and actions of Marianne, in the way that she forgets her luggage and slams on the brakes, implies that she's in a hurry, possibly even guilty, and doesn't trust the officer. Because when he came, her behavior was more disrupted, The camera is placed at an angle of the car to get the full view of Marianne, her old car, the officer, the dealer, and the man with her luggage. Marianne and her new car dominate the frame and probably suggest that the car plays an important role later on in the film. The only contrast in color, however, is the dark uniform of the officer, which also proves her mistrust of him. The jump cuts in these shots are pretty abrupt to parallel her state of mind and anxiety. This shot is more character driven, and the dialogue is hesitant when it comes to the man and exasperated when it comes to Marianne. The whole entire persona of the officer and the fact that the dealer has no idea what's going on and all of Marianne's secrets create this mysterious air. The Next shot shows Marion driving. Visually, time is being passed by the sky changing from light to dark. Her expression is key here because it also changes to reflect her thoughts and how things change throughout the night. It also shows her growing guilt and knowledge that she is trapped because if she returns, she will go to jail. This whole scene is a headshot so that we focus more on her expression and the shadows that are being cast upon her face as the night progresses, and a sort of chiaroscuro lighting to show her conflicting emotions, in a light versus dark sort of way. Also, the head shot symbolizes that something psychological is happening here. The point of view shot of the road lets us know that as the night progresses, the weather is also worsening and establishes her as the protagonist to mislead us because we sympathize with her entrapment and the harsh conditions on the road. The shot then cuts back to her face, squinting and tilting to see better with even darker shadows on her face and her eyes more wide and frantic. The background music is the famous theme song of this movie, Psycho, and it's played very soft, and it puts more of a frantic undertone to set the mood and shows the anxiety and nervousness she is going through while she is running away or driving away. The non-diegetic sound that the audience hears here are of those who are chasing and looking for her. You hear the officer and the dealer talking about how suspicious she looks and how it's weird she gave him $700 cash. You hear her boss and coworker saying how she's late and to ask her sister, but no one can find her. And later they eventually realize that it was the money and that she took it. And then you hear the man who owns the money saying that she had some nerve to take his money to flirt with him, and that he will basically replace it with her fine soft flesh, which is ironic as she was killed. Plus, after this is said, we see a point of view of when it first begins to rain and it is pitch black outside, almost as if it's sealing her fate. She can't necessarily hear the conversations between everyone, which shows that she's oblivious as to who knows and who's chasing her, and she's also oblivious as to what she's running toward. This scene is told in a chronological order with the time of day and the conversations that are going on at the moment about Marion as she is running away. The nature of the dialogue is also very climatic and is character driven, since the focus is in fact Marion, which explains the reason that the camera is so focused on her head. The chiaroscuro lighting and frantic pace of the music aid the horror genre. The idea that she has no idea what she's getting into and that no one can find her adds to the mystery, and also the focus on her head shows that there are psychological aspects involved. The scene ends as she sees the Bates Motel sign and pulls up to it. There is little light illuminating the place, which sort of gives it a dark, foreboding feeling. Also, the mystery as to where on earth she is headed and getting herself into. The rain helps to create this gloomy mood, to highlight the whole empty motel horror scene, anything can happen sort of persona. The scene parallels the idea, this whole scene as a whole parallels the idea that Marion is running from the authorities, just as Norman is trying to run from his authority figure, his mother. However, both cannot fully escape, and this leads to their downfall. The director intends to show us how inferiority makes it hard for anyone to truly escape, that we're all lost within our own minds, and our thoughts control our actions, and our actions then basically control our fate. So by the car being small and the camera being placed in a way so that the area looks small, we can't see basically the whole half of the car and only the space that Marion is in. The point of view shots of the road, and this helps us to see that she's basically trapped because of the rain. She can't get out of the car. The target audience of this film were basically older teenagers and young adults of both genders. The women could relate to Marion and were attracted to her personality, while the men were more attracted to the violence and the mystery behind this film. It was not usual for a woman to travel alone and to handle the money. So this could be her punishment for straying away from the norm, and why she's being chased, because maybe they're trying to bring her back into society. And this probably leads to her downfall because she didn't stay with the norm. So this film, in relation to the director Alfred Hitchcock's work, includes like Vertigo and The Birds, which show those ideas that everything is not as it seems. It has more psychological aspects to it. It's filmed in black and white to show that light and dark contrast, and there are themes of death in there. In the movie Marnie, the main character desires to be loved by her mother, just like Norman loves his mother so much that she takes over his mind. During the 1950s, many communities very strongly resented the police, especially in the South. Before the Civil Rights Movement, police systematically abused people, especially minorities. And like going back to the film, the police officer, because of this and his status and the fact that she was a woman, he could have questioned her a lot more, but I'm guessing because this shows how unreliable he was and that he really wasn't planning on doing anything in the first place, and that if he would have actually done something that is actually more suspicious, she probably would have actually lived and the money would have been returned to the man. But then again, someone else may have been a victim, and Norman may have never been caught, by the way. In the smaller communities as well as the largest ones in the South, this generated like a lot of animosity towards the police. And in major cities, including the Northeast and California, which also includes the areas of like where Arizona is, there was hostility towards the police. These citizens also resented the police departments for their physical brutality and abuse of power. They mistrusted them as a protective institution, and in ways they were regarded as more powerful. They didn't have the limitations on what the police could constitutionally do were not imposed during the 50s. So the police were basically more or less untouchable. You know, they were older white men, you know, they can get away with a lot. Mothers during the 1950s women during the 1950s were expected to be married, inferior to their husbands, take care of their children, and more loving. You know, food on the table, keep the house clean. They let the man work, and the men handle the money. Marion, however, defies that. She's unmarried and works to make her own money. She also stole money and purchased a car of her own. Also, it was more uncommon for women to travel alone, especially at night. Even Norman's mother, we get this idea that towards the end of the movie that as a child she may not have been as loving as she should have been, which also shows that she defies the norms of the 1950s mother. This is powerful in terms of Marion because it establishes her as a protagonist, but this misleads the audience because she's soon killed off, and it kind of shows that we should be more careful as the film progresses because everything is not as it seems. Initially there were mixed reviews of this. Many critics did not like it. For example, a British critic was so offended that she walked out before it ended and resigned permanently from her post as a film critic for The Observer. Others said it was played out beautifully and that the actors' performances were the best of their careers. However, the audience loved this movie. And because of this, the critics did a re-review of this movie and praised it. This movie was ahead of its time and it disturbed many, but it still changed cinema and censorship forever. It has impacted so many movies. Initially it was criticized for making other filmmakers more willing to show gore, but it basically set the stage, like this scene basically set the stage for the rest of the movie, and her death proved that the audience may be less misled, just like she was during the rest of the movie.